From the newsroom of the Bryan College Station Eagle, this is the Brazos Sports Prepscast. And now, the Eagle High School sports team, Alex Miller and Jake Weiss.
What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Brazos Sports Prepscast. I'm Alex Miller with the Eagle, joined always by Jake Weiss, the Eagles high school sports reporter. It's week 2 of the Texas high school football season. Week 1, some interesting results, some tough losses for a couple Brazos Valley teams, some big wins for some others.
Yeah.
We'll break it all down. And special guest this week is Colton Foster, the Huntsville item. He's breaking down last week's game between Consolidated and Huntsville and this week's matchup between Bryan and Huntsville. Jake, what's up, my guy?
Yeah, doing good, Alex. It's crazy to think like week 1 went by pretty quick. I thought. I don't know about you, but I guess
It
yeah.
it definitely did. I don't know about you, Jake, but my game had a little bit of fireworks that I was at. Think yours was a little different than mine, but we got to see each of the College Station schools. We'll get to Consol in a minute, but I guess we can start with the Cougars.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested, Alex. What'd you see out of the Cougars, man?
Yeah, they went up to Allen again, played the Tom Landry Classic. To me, it seemed that there was a little bit of deja vu from the Cougars from last year, playing a top 10 team in Lovejoy. Lovejoy has such star power on offense, and there were a few similarities between the two games. College Station started strong, but Lovejoy really took away in the second quarter. This year, they scored 27 unanswered points to really take control by halftime. And, Coach Pryor just kind of said, that Lovejoy just kind of stayed the course, and things just kind of got away from them at the end of the first quarter, beginning of the second. Lovejoy, really lethal passing game. Quarterback Hondo Franklin, he had 369 yards, 5 touchdowns passing. And his top guy was Parker Livingstone, committed to the University of Texas, and he looked ready to play on Saturdays full time. He got 12 passes for 253 yards and 3 touchdowns, and he was really an unstoppable force. Lovejoy had a lot of big plays. I counted 13 passes of more than 15 yards. And should be noted that College Station was without safety Tony Hamilton, kind of a key piece of that defense that made it all the way to state championship game last year. A tough night for the Cougars secondary, but on the flip side, I thought the Cougar offense looked pretty solid. Arrington Maiden really showed some poise in the pocket, made some really good throws, threw for over 300 yards, but man, Lovejoy had a really good front seven. The Cougars just really couldn't run the ball super well. And some of their biggest runs really came in the fourth quarter when the game was pretty much out of reach. Jake Pivita was a bright spot, though. Hauled in 5 catches for over 100 yards and a touchdown. And so, talking to Arrington after the game, though, I was kind of like, there's a few similarities. And he was like, yeah, yes and no, like, sure, maybe how the game played out was a little similar, but, he said that, where this team is at right now is vastly different from where last year's team was at after week 1. And so I think I tend to agree with him. And so, definitely curious to see how things play out for the Cougars in the coming weeks. They have the bye week this week, then they go play at Temple next week. Temple's always a pretty good team, so that will definitely be probably a challenge for the Cougars. But yeah, if you're College Station, obviously you're disappointed you didn't get the win, but I don't know if the Cougars should necessarily be discouraged either after their performance, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense completely. And you mentioned the bye. I kind of hate to put you on the spot here, but I was just kind of curious. What do you think? I don't know. We obviously don't know who will be going where in terms of our staff, but just kind of against Temple, what would you kind of want to see from the Cougars? Kind of build off of week 1.
I think for them, finding a way to really establish the run a little better is going to be a key, because if you know College Station, you know that running the ball is often their bread and butter. And they've got a really good running back in Aiden Martinez Brown, who he actually left the game in the second quarter due to some cramping, and so bye week, maybe you think week 2 bye week, that's not necessarily ideal. You want it kind of maybe in the middle of the season or even that last week so you can get healthy before the playoffs. But with two of their better players on the sidelines right now, maybe this isn't too bad of a time to kind of get healthy and reload for the rest of the year. But definitely want to see them find a way to get the running game going a little better. Offensive line was definitely a question mark for them coming into the season. They kept Arrington pretty clean, had a couple of sacks, a couple of hits, but other than that, I thought they held their own pretty well. But creating those holes is going to be a big thing, and then of course that secondary really locking down and trying to cover a little better, I think is going to be a big thing for them, especially a road game against Temple. Well, on the other side of town, looking at the Rudder Rangers, they kind of had their hands full with Willis last week, having to face Florida commit DJ Lagway, threw for 422 yards and 7 touchdowns, and Rudder coming off a tough season last year, was still able to put up 21 points and kind of hold their own in the second half a little bit too. Looked like Cody Billings had a decent night. Jaquise Barton had a couple of long touchdown catches and even threw a 75-yard touchdown of itself. The Rangers, they're gonna have a kind of a tricky game against Salado this week. I'm pretty sure Salado beat them last year too, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, they did. I was looking back. We always do our high school picks every week, and I was kind of looking at that one, and yeah, Salado. I think Rudder tied it up, and then at 28 all late in the game, and then Salado kind of pulled away there in the fourth. I think they ended up winning that game 38-28. Kind of interested to see, like you mentioned, Rudder was pretty improved last week. I think obviously there's no moral victories, but I think if you're Rudder, you got to feel somewhat pretty good about how last week went. I think the year before, Willis put up what 70 points, 60 points. Thank you. In last year's matchup, and I think Rudder only scored 14. So yeah, they're taking a little bit of a step forward. So I kind of think this week we'll see that again.
For those watching on the video and those who can't, a little cameo from Robert Cessna, the Eagles sports editor. I wonder what Cease has to say about the Rudder Rangers.
It's a very serious atmosphere around.
Keep
Hey,
going, Jake.
we should have got him on for the Bryan segment.
Hey, it's not too late. But continue.
No, that was pretty much all I had to say about Rudder. I think this week's kind of they talked about wanting to get back to the playoffs. I know it's still non-district, but I think this week's game is a good one that kind of take another step forward, kind of continue down the path they want to go. And I think this week's game against Salado could be one where you kind of see that those steps being taken.
Well, and hey, as that other guy walked behind you and is now right here for those on the video, that's Travis Brown. He's the Eagles Aggie sports reporter. He'll be at Salado versus Rudder this Friday, so be sure to follow along his coverage Friday night over there in I think is that Bell County? It might be it's either Bell County or Williamson County. Now you got me
Bell County's
now,
Bell Temple.
now you got me. Yep, it's in Bell County. I had it right. So there you go. Okay,
Say, don't ask me.
enough with the geography lesson. Let's talk about private schools. And hey, while we're talking about Travis Brown, his alma mater, Dallas First Baptist, came and played Brazos Christian last week, and the Saints, they kind of had their way in that matchup. Got out to a pretty big lead early and didn't really look back. I gotta say, just looking at the box score, it looks like Jackson Caffey, he kind of had a decent night. We know he's kind of a dual threat guy. Threw for 159 yards, had 100 yards rushing, and that's just a tough loss for Brazos Christian. They knew it was going to be a tough game, but yeah, definitely probably not the way they wanted to start their season, Jake.
Yeah, no. While we're kind of on the topic of our private schools, kind of thought it was kind of up and down week for them overall. We talk about Brazos Christian had a tough loss. BB Chia beat Allen Academy. it's kind of weird. That's kind of a home and home game because they both use that field.
Mm-hmm.
So it's what is it? I guess you'd have to just call it a home. It's not a neutral site game. I guess it is a home and home. I don't really know what you call that one.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, like I was thinking about that earlier. Like, what would you call that? But yeah, so kind of a tough week for both of them, Allen Academy and Brazos Christian. The good thing is they're both back at home this week, I believe. I know they'll want to rebound. Allen Academy's got what, Bracken Christian, and for Brazos Christian, I know they have Snook this week. Snook's got to come to their place. Both teams 0-1 to start the year. Both be looking for that first win. But hey, for Brazos Christian, I mean, they believe I'm trying to remember from last year's matchup. I believe they beat Snook. Am I right
So
about
they
that?
were so that game actually got canceled. We'll get to that in a minute, but the game
Oh,
actually
okay.
got canceled in the middle of I think it was the first or the second quarter, and I can't remember why. But Brazos Christian was winning the game when the game got called off. I think maybe the lights went out or something. I'd have to go look at it. It was kind of a weird deal. But you know, something that was interesting too is that St. Joseph, how about St. Joseph beating Coram Diao
Yeah.
Academy? You know, they were picked to lose by like 45 points, the mercy rule in six man, and they go out and mercy rule Coram Dio. So maybe the spread people had it picked the wrong way. They like typed it in incorrectly. I don't know, but I was like, wow. How about St. Joe's getting the job done week one?
Hey, Mark Mishler and the fellows, man, they were getting it going. I saw Mark's stat line yesterday. He posted it to Twitter. He said, "Good team win," and I was like, "Hey, that about sums it up, man."
There you go. Well, hey, Bryan, uh, they definitely showed good defense in the red zone against Waller. Only held the Bulldogs to one field goal on three trips inside the Bryan 10, and you know, Ricky Tolis had some high praise for his defense after the game. It sounded like, and Waller only had 181 yards of offense, and Bryan had three fumble recoveries. So, pretty good night for the Viking defense, even though their offense kind of, still trying to figure itself out and get things going on that side of the ball.
Yeah, I was gonna say I know Isaiah Nuttall had a long rushing touchdown. I think Boone had a rushing touchdown as well. I want to say Casey Bird had I want to say he threw one to Terrence Lewis. So kind of interesting there that they're still kind of using both guys at quarterback. I know they still want to get the offensive line kind of figured out. That's a young group, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Bryan can do against Huntsville because we'll talk to Colton later. But I know last year when they played, I was at that game, and I think the final score of that one was like 14-6. It was early, of course, and it was Bryan's first road game of the season. So kind of interested to see. Now this will be Bryan's home opener. Kind of interested to see maybe do the roles reverse or kind of where do we go from here this week. But we'll talk about that later with Colton when he comes on.
Well, without further ado, let's get to our conversation with Colton Foster of the Huntsville Item, breaking down last week's game between A&M Consolidated and Huntsville and this week's matchup between the Vikings and Hornets. Welcome back, y'all. This is Brazos Sports Preps Cast. Joining us now is Mr. Colton Foster. He's the sports editor over at the Huntsville Item, covering all things Huntsville High School, some Sam Houston State. Colton, what's up, man? Glad you're on today.
I appreciate y'all for having me. Just getting back in the swing of things with all this high school sports and football kicking into gear this weekend.
Yeah, kind of a little fitting to have you on the show because last week the Hornets played A&M Consolidated. This week they play the Bryan Vikings. Of course, we'll break down each of those games. So, maybe just kind of starting out, Colton, what'd you kind of see from Huntsville in their game last week against Consol?
I saw a team that was ready to play. Last year, the game against Consol, it got out of hand very quickly. This year, not so much. Huntsville made a few mistakes. They were still able to kind of stay in it. This year they're going to rely a lot on the run game, and they did that very, very much in that game against Consol. I want to say they ran the ball, 37 total times. I mean, that's just going to be what they stick to. Trayshawn Brown's just a sophomore at 111 yards, and it's going to be a recipe for them all year.
Jake, Consol came away with the win. It wasn't necessarily an easy one for him, though. What'd you kind of see, especially in that second half, that allowed Consol to kind of pull away and get the win?
Yeah, so I mean, this is something that Coach Min and I talked about afterwards too. Alex, you've seen a lot of Colton, you saw Consol last year. They're kind of a team that likes to run the ball, especially with the talent they have. Trey Taylor, Keyshawn. This year you're adding Cameron Vines into the mix. Run game kind of struggled there, but in the fourth quarter, I mean, they got a 73-yard touchdown run from Cameron Vines. That really helped them kind of put it away. Put them up 21, 12 at the time. So that was a big run. It was the best run of the day for Consol, but so I know that's something they still want to work on. Big shout out to the defense though. They had 5 takeaways. They came ready to play, man. I mean, that was a big factor, especially because that 73-yard touchdown, I think came maybe a play or maybe 2 plays right after an interception by Aiden Berryman. So yeah, they came to play. Defense was a little bit ahead of the offense, I thought, though.
I feel like the run game is something that we talked about was something we were going to be watching for, not for Consol, not only how their offensive line shaped up, but also kind of how they were going to utilize, Keyshawn and Trey, guys that they really relied on last year, but also with Cameron Vines. Jake, all that goes to say, where do you think the Tigers are going to look to grow this week as they come back home against the team from Mexico?
Yeah, it's going to be a big. I think the next 2 weeks are really big for Consol. They only have 2 more non-district games, so you're going to want to see that growth right before you go into district. So this week, I think they're going to want to improve on the run game. They're going to want to see a bit more consistency from the offense. Defense, I mean, after a game where you have 5 turnovers, I don't think. I'm sure there's stuff they want to improve on internally, but it's kind of hard to just come out and say like, yeah, they could have done this better or this better. But I think really for me, just the big focus would be probably on the offensive side of the ball. Quarterback play, a little bit more consistency. But it's a new offense and defense. I think you just want to kind of improve each week as you get ready for district play.
Colton, this is kind of how Huntsville's season started a little bit last year. Of course, lost to Consol and then come back around with the game against Bryan. What's kind of the Hornets mindset from what you've heard this week heading into this game against the Bryan Vikings?
Like you said, it's shaping up a lot like last year. Lose week 1, get the week 2 win. But what Huntsville is really looking for this year or for this week is every position is in a battle right now. There was countless of offside penalties. There was a couple false starts. Quarterback plays in question. This week, really, Huntsville is just going to utilize being able to get some of their youth to just get more reps. Their defensive line is built with 2 or 3 sophomores. Their offensive line is completely new this week. Or this season. Every game is just a new experience. And luckily for the Hornets, they've got at least 3 more they have 3 more non-district games before the games really start to matter and playoff implications pick up.
Jake, I think you got a chance to talk with Tate Allen earlier this week. Just give us a little insight on your conversation with him and just, maybe some keys to victory Bryan's looking to accomplish on Friday night.
Yeah, we didn't really talk too much about the game. We kind of just talked about his kind of last 4 years for him at Bryan. But I think kind of going off of what Colton said, he just talked about how, young Huntsville is. Got a lot of sophomores, got a lot of young guys, kind of every position's a battle. Kind of you look at Bryan, just when talking with Tate, I mean, he's kind of the perfect example of this. But, Bryan's kind of across the board, a little bit older, a little bit wiser. I mean, Tate, for example, has been on varsity all 4 years, pretty much been a 4-year starter on varsity. I think his first game, he said he split some time at fullback with some guys, and then after that, kind of the position was his. So I think, especially on the defensive side of the ball, Bryan's kind of a little older, got a bit more maturity. It's a pretty senior defense. Colton mentions the quarterbacks, though. I know Tate and I didn't talk about this, but this is something Alex, you and I have talked about. Kind of interesting. I think Bryan's kind of in the same spot. Talking with our sports editor, Robert Cessna, he was at the Bryan game against Waller last week, and Bryan's still kind of figuring out things on the offense. So they use the 2 quarterbacks. So I think kind of there on offense, Bryan's a little bit similar to Huntsville, but I think on the defensive side of the ball, Bryan's a veteran group. They kind of know what to do at this point. A lot of seniors over there.
Colton, what do you kind of see as maybe a couple keys to victory for Huntsville this week?
I mean, as Jake mentioned earlier, 5 turnovers is, I mean, it's just a lot. So being able to limit those, like Southern said after the game, if you're going to throw something away, make sure it's in the stands. Don't give the other team an opportunity. Trayshawn Brown, that was just his third real varsity action, and it was first time getting hit this year, and he coughed the ball up twice. Now he's got that experience. He's got that. I mean, not turning the ball over is going to be huge. Their Texas Tech commit and Isaiah Collins didn't suit up last week, but he's expected to be back this week, which will help with the secondary play, give him more experience than a senior. But other than that, I mean, really just being consistent and being able to play Huntsville's game was going to be key for them rather than, getting behind early. Or last year, I want to say they got out to a quick 14-0 lead against Bryan and were able to just kind of hold on to that. I mean, doing something similar to that this year would be key for this offense that's still trying to get it, and a defense that has kind of figured things out and is capable of being one of the best defenses in Texas.
Hey, gonna have maybe a little future Red Raider on Red Raider action with Tyson Turner, Isaiah Collins covering each other on Friday night. That'd be kind of fun.
Yeah, I know he missed last week. He's supposed to be back, but as long as they have him on their sideline, Isaiah will be there for him.
That's fair. Well, hey, Colton, while we've got you on, Huntsville, of course, they play in District 10 5A Division 2 with a couple of Brazos Valley teams. They're playing Bryan Vikings this week. They'll have to play the Rudder Rangers later this year along with the Brenham Cubs. What's kind of maybe an early outlook for the district and maybe some key contenders in that district?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a dogfight. I think I think it's a 7-team district, and there's going to be 5 teams that are going to be really good. I mean, it's going to come down to Lake Creek and all that. Rudder, I know they're still kind of rebuilding and working on getting back to where they've been the last couple of years. That Brenham team is not going to be a joke again. I want to say they have their running back is coming back. I can't remember his name, but he's back. I mean, their offense last year was able to kind of light up Huntsville. But Huntsville's defense is really going to be something to pay attention to this year. I mean, they are youthful, but they have a lot of experience, and they have a lot of strong players that can go out there and wreck games. I want to say that game is the second to last one of the season for Huntsville and Brenham, and it could have major playoff implications. But we'll see how kind of things shake up as the season kind of trucks on.
Pretty sure Brenham's safety was our defensive player of the week, Jake. Cubs had a really impressive win over Oak Ridge too, week 1.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a 6A school. They lost to them last year, and I mean we all 3 of us saw what Brenham did last year. So I mean they beat them this year. Kind of interested to see what they can do now. I know it's only 1 game, but I mean you lose last year, and they made the regional semifinals last year.
Yeah, and Colton, if I'm not mistaken, did I read maybe on your Twitter or X, I should say, that Huntsville, of course, they're opening their new stadium, and it looks like maybe that game against Rudder might be that target date that they're trying to get it open at?
It's up in the air, but right now it's looking to be against Montgomery. It's kind of where it's sitting right now. The first district game is going to be it, but it should for sure be ready by the Rudder game. I know it's very close. The lights have gone up, the lettering's gone up. It's just a matter of passing inspections and getting everything ready to go for that Friday night game day.
Yeah, what does that stadium kind of mean for the town of Huntsville? Because I mean they've played at Bowers for quite a number of years now.
It's going to be awesome for this town. It's the first time Huntsville High School ever have their own stadium, and if I'm not mistaken, they are one of only 3 5A Texas high schools that do not have their own place to play. I was talking to Southern today, and he said, people make a lot out of road games. But for Huntsville, every game is kind of a home game or a road game because they always have to get on a bus and travel. Just being able to have a locker room that's yours with your colors and your logos, being able to just run out onto your field, it's going to be huge for this team, especially if they can get into it, with district play, if not even, a week before. But yeah, just getting that town, being able to drive by when you're driving through, seeing the H light up, right behind it, you have a baseball and softball field, a brand new field house. They have a brand new weight room going in that's going to overlook the field. I mean, just it means everything to these kids, and it's something that they've deserved for a long time, and it's finally coming to fruition.
Well, hey, Colton, before we let you go one more time, just how can people follow your work on Friday nights this fall?
Yeah, you can find me on X at Colton Foster 98, I think. Yep, that's me. And itemonline.com is where you can find just anything Huntsville related for sports.
Sweet. Well, hey, we appreciate you coming on and just giving us a little insight on the Hornets and the first 2 games of their season.
No problem. Appreciate it. Thank you all, guys.
All right, Jake, we're back. Final segment. Let's do 3 quick games to watch. Let's start with Madisonville at Navasota. It's a big one in Navasota. Last week, Madisonville took down Diboll. Sounded like Ty Williams had a strong night, had found Lorenzo Johnson. We talked about Texas Tech commits. Lorenzo Johnson. Is he committed to Texas Tech?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, that's what I
Unless
thought.
something's changed. Yeah.
I don't know why I was second guessing myself, but yeah, he's committed to Texas Tech. He's been committed to Tech for a while,
Yeah,
actually.
I thought so.
I was like, hold
Yeah, I
up.
want to say last spring.
But sounded like Tristan Wally had a big night, 7 tackles, pair of fumble recoveries and forced fumbles. And on the other hand, Navasota struggled a little bit against Navarro and only didn't even get 100 yards of offense. Rattlers threw 3 interceptions that game.
Yeah, I think I don't know. This is an interesting one because last year this was kind of an early season momentum swing. So it'll be interesting to see because this one's in Madisonville. Believe this one kind of gave Navasota a pretty big little boost of momentum last year because they won last year's game. Am I right about that?
Yeah, they did. Navasota did win 27-21. I was trying to pull it up as we were talking, and Navasota did win that game. Kind of got we thought. I mean, it was a big win for the Rattlers and them going through the regular season. But if I'm kind of looking right, I think Madisonville is probably the favorite going into this game. Wouldn't you say, Jake?
Yeah, I think so. We talk about a guy like Lorenzo, but they got playmakers all over the field. Ty Williams. Heck, we didn't even talk about this when we were talking about last week's win for them. But I mean, they had an 87-yard punt return, touchdown from Jakeem Owens. So I mean, kind of offense, defense, special teams, all 3 phases. They looked real good last week, and I kind of don't expect that to change again this week.
Well, hey, game number 2, Crawford at Centerville. This is one of the top games in the state, especially at the small school ranks. Top 10 matchup in Class 2A. Crawford won by 2 scores last year, but the Tigers, they're 1 spot higher than the Pirates in this week's poll. So, Centerville beat Buffalo last week, 27-6. Zantel Holly, LaMarcus Justice had over 100 yards rushing. Andrew Newman, another solid night. Wade Nealand. I mean, these are guys that we know their names, right? And Zantel Holly, of course, making plays on defense. Not too surprising. For Centerville, this is a game that I think is probably a good litmus test to how legit a contender they are. Beat by Timpson the last 2 years. Timpson #1 in the state and 2A1. Of course, they've got Terry Bussey, who A&M's after, of course. But this is a big game for the Tigers, especially at home, and especially because if I'm not mistaken, Centerville's got to play Mart again here pretty quickly.
Yeah, I believe they have March their last game of.
Yeah, 2 more
It's not
weeks.
next week, but 2 more weeks.
Yeah. So, definitely a big game for the Tigers this week. When you think, Jake?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, you were at the game last year, the Centerville. You were at this game, right?
I was at the Centerville Mart game. Actually, our editor Steve Boggs was at the Crawford Centerville game, and I think Crawford pulled away pretty late. It was a pretty close game throughout the night, but I'm trying to pull up the box score from last year. If I remember correctly, Centerville.
Yeah, Centerville. I was able to. I got the faster internet speed. No, I'm just kidding. But no, yeah, it looks like here. Yeah, Crawford pulled away in the third and fourth quarter. Centerville was actually leading going into halftime. They were up 6-0, but 3 late touchdowns helped Crawford pull away in that one, 21-6. But like you said, I mean, 2-score game. Centerville moved up in the polls, like you talked about. They're now number. I think they were 6 preseason. Now they're number 5.
Yeah,
Uh, so, and what's Crawford at? Is Crawford at 6 now?
I think they're at 6 or 7. Yeah, they're like one spot away from each other. So.
Well, hey, point is, I mean, I know we're not. I have to go back and check that, but point is, we both know this is gonna be a big game, top 10 matchup. It's a good litmus test for district play. I mean, this is kind of like the Madisonville Navasota game. This is one you really want on your schedule in non-district to go, hey, regardless of outcome, if it's a close game and you lose, you can say, hey guys, going to the district, we can hang with these guys. You win the game, hey guys, look who we just beat. This should give us a big old boost of confidence.
Well, our last game to look at this week is Snook at Brazos Christian. Snook had that narrow loss to Iola last week, and this is kind of a game that some Brazos Christian players told me before the season that they kind of had circled because that this is a game that kind of got cut short on them last year when it was all going down. Jake, what are you kind of looking at this matchup? Yeah, I know you got to write the preseason story on Snook.
Yeah, so Snook's kind of in an interesting spot. They've got this is their biggest. I remember Coach Conway told me this. This is his I believe 4th season at Snook. In his all his years at Snook, he said, "Hey, this is the first year where we have our most upperclassmen, senior and junior class. I'm really relying on them to lead the way. One of those big names is J. Boy Huska, quarterback. We've talked about him before in the podcast. This is 2nd year starter, so he's more comfortable in the offense. Just really kind of think for Snook, they're going to really rely on those veterans. They've got Jordan Coronado coming back. I know he wasn't able to play last year. He missed a couple of games at the beginning of the season to injury. I know he got hurt in the scrimmage, and so he missed a couple of those games. They're happy to have him back, hopefully for the whole season. So I think for Snook, it's a tough loss to Iola. Kind of an interesting one too, because I think Snook won that game last year. Could be wrong though. I feel like they beat Iola last year. But I just think for Snook, this can be one that you kind of look for and go, hey, let's get back on track. Really expect those upperclassmen to step up and kind of lead the way, get those younger guys ready. I think maybe a kind of a common theme that we kind of haven't talked about yet, but I think for a lot of our teams, you might look and see some low-scoring games. But I think in week 1, but I just feel like that was a lot of first game jitters, and I think maybe Snook might have been a little susceptible to, and Brazos Christian since they lost as well. Maybe just those first game jitters kind of got to you. But now here in week 2, I think you kind of can't use that as an excuse anymore.
Well, hey, I think that about covers it for week 2. What do you say, Jake?
Yeah, I think we're all good, man. I think we covered it all. All we do is fit the print.
Well, hey, if you got any comments or complaints, you can email Robert Cessna at robert.cessna@theeagle.com. All right. Be sure to check all of our coverage of this week's games leading up to week 2 and coverage of Friday night on theeagle.com. We'll be back next week, of course, breaking down all the action here in the Brazos Valley. We'll see you then.